The year is 1929, and in the sterile, echoey halls of the Eberswalde Surgical Clinic in Germany, there is a line that no doctor dares to cross. It is an invisible boundary drawn by centuries of medical dogma, as solid and impenetrable as the hospital's brick walls. The rule is simple, absolute, and terrified. Noli me tangere. Do not touch. For the medical establishment of the early 20th century, the human heart is not just an organ, it is a black box, a sacred sanctuary. To enter it with a foreign object is considered tantamount to murder. The prevailing wisdom, shouted from the podiums of every medical school in Europe, is that any intrusion into the heart chambers will cause immediate, fatal cardiac arrest. The heart is the engine of life, and the mechanic is forbidden from opening the hood while it is running. But in the cramped smell-of-ether quarters of the interns, 25-year-old Werner Forssmann is staring at a textbook, and he is seeing something the old professors are missing. He is not thinking about the sanctity of the heart. He is thinking about plumbing. He traces the blue lines of the veins in an anatomy diagram. They are highways, wide, unobstructed roads that lead directly to the center of the chest. Why, he wonders, are we blindly stabbing needles into the chest cavity in emergencies, hoping to hit the right spot, when we could just drive up the road? The idea consumes him. It keeps him awake while the senior surgeons sleep the sleep of the righteous. He visualizes a thin, flexible tube, a catheter, sliding through the vein in the elbow, gliding up the arm, dipping under the collarbone, and slipping silently into the right atrium of the heart. It is elegant, it is logical, and according to his superiors, it is suicide. The tension comes to a head in the office of Dr. Richard Schneider, the clinic's chief of surgery. Forssmann stands before the heavy oak desk, his hands likely sweating, his heart rate elevated, the very organ he wants to conquer, beating a frantic rhythm against his ribs. He pitches his radical idea, a way to deliver life-saving drugs directly to the source, to measure pressure, to see the unseeable. Schneider's face hardens. He looks at the young intern with a mixture of pity and annoyance. The answer is swift and crushing. No. Forssmann is forbidden from performing the experiment. The risk is too high. The reputation of the clinic is too fragile. To attempt such a thing would be to play God with a clumsy hand. You will kill the patient, he implies, dismissing the boy. Forssmann leaves the office, the door clicking shut with a finality that would have stopped a lesser man. But the rejection doesn't kill the idea, it feeds it. He walks the corridors, the sounds of the hospital, the squeak of gurneys, the coughs of patients, fading into background noise. He knows the physics are on his side, he knows the anatomy is compatible, but he has a problem that theory cannot solve. To prove the medical world wrong, he needs a human body. He needs a living system to host the tube. He cannot ask a patient, that would be criminal. He cannot ask a colleague, they would report him. He needs someone who has access to the sterile equipment, someone who trusts him, and ultimately, someone he can control. He stops at the supply cabinet. He realizes with a cold, terrifying clarity that there is only one way to get this done. He doesn't just need a volunteer. He needs an accomplice. The plan hinges on a single person, Nurse Gerda Ditzen. She is the gatekeeper of the sterile supply room, the guardian of the needles, the bandages, and the ureteral catheters, the thin, flexible tubes normally used for urology, not cardiology. Forssmann knows he cannot simply steal the equipment. He needs her to give it to him. And so he begins a dangerous game of manipulation. He finds her in the quiet lull of the afternoon. He speaks to her not as a subordinate, but as a partner in a grand scientific adventure. He pours his passion into the conversation, his eyes burning with the intensity of a zealot. He tells her that this procedure could change everything, that they could be the ones to break the barrier. He plays on her curiosity, perhaps even her affection. He asks her to be his volunteer. Gerda Ditzen looks at the young doctor. She sees the conviction in his face. She agrees. She is willing to risk her life for his theory. It is a moment of profound trust, a shared pact against the establishment. But Forssmann has no intention of letting her die. He has a secret that he keeps locked behind his teeth as they walk toward the operating room. The room is cold, smelling of antiseptic and steel. The afternoon light filters through the high windows, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air, the only things moving in the heavy silence. Forssmann directs Gerda to the operating table. "For your safety," he says, his voice steady, masking the tremor in his hands. He straps her down. The leather buckles pull tight against her wrists and ankles. She is secured, unable to move, unable to interfere. She believes she is about to become the first human subject of cardiac catheterization. She waits, eyes closed, bracing for the incision. But Forssmann turns his back to her. He moves to the instrument tray. He picks up the syringe of Novocaine, but he does not walk toward the nurse. He rolls up the sleeve of his own white coat. He finds the cubital vein in his left arm, the blue lifeline pulsing just beneath the skin of his elbow. Jab. The needle slides in. He numbs his own flesh. Behind him, Gerda realizes something is wrong. The sounds are coming from the wrong direction. She strains against the straps, her head lifting. She sees the doctor huddled over his own arm. "Werner!" she cries out. "What are you doing?" He ignores her. The clock on the wall ticks louder than a bomb. He picks up the scalpel. With a steady hand, he slices into his own skin. Blood wells up, dark and warm. He creates the opening. He grabs the catheter, a 65-centimeter-long rubber tube, thin as a piece of spaghetti. He inserts the tip into his vein. This is the moment of truth. If the dogma is right, he will collapse in seconds. He pushes the tube. 10 centimeters. 20. He feels a strange, dull pressure sliding up his arm, a foreign invader moving through his own meat. It reaches his shoulder. He pushes it further, past the collarbone. He is operating on himself, wide awake, while the nurse he tricked watches in helpless horror, screaming at him to stop. But the tube is already deep inside him, inching closer to the forbidden chamber. He is committed. There is no turning back. The tube is in. Forssmann stands there, sweat beading on his forehead, a rubber line disappearing into the crook of his bloody arm. He is still alive. He breathes. His heart beats, unaware that it has been invaded. He turns to Gerda, who is furious, terrified, and still strapped to the table. He unbuckles her. "It's done," he might say, breathless. "But we need proof. Without an X-ray, this is just a fisherman's tale. It is a hallucination. He needs the picture." What follows is a surreal, nightmarish procession. The intern with a catheter threaded through his veins and dangling from his arm, and the nurse, supporting him, walk out of the operating room. They have to traverse the hospital corridors to get to the radiology department in the basement. They take the stairs. Every step is a gamble. If the tube snags, if he trips, if the catheter pierces a vein wall or tickles the ventricle the wrong way, he could drop dead right there on the linoleum. They reach the X-ray room. The technician stares at them, mouth agape, as if looking at ghosts. Forssmann steps behind the fluoroscope screen. He orders the technician to turn it on. The machine hums to life, buzzing with high voltage. Forssmann looks into the mirror, and there it is. A ghostly skeletal image of his own chest. The ribs are a cage of shadows, and weaving through them, stark and undeniable, is the catheter. It is looped all the way down, the tip resting inside the right auricle of his heart. It is a picture of the impossible. He is touching his own heart, and he is smiling. The victory, however, is short-lived. The fallout is immediate and brutal. When Dr. Schneider sees the X-ray, he doesn't see a breakthrough, he sees a scandal. Forssmann is hauled before the administration. He is fired for his circus act. The medical community mocks him. They call him a madman, a danger to the profession. Crushed and humiliated, Werner Forssmann is forced out of cardiology. He retreats to the countryside, becoming a urologist, spending his days treating kidney stones and prostate issues, his revolutionary moment buried under the weight of professional exile. Years bleed into decades. A world war comes and goes. The technology he pioneered is rediscovered by others, Cornond and Richards in New York, who refine it, using it to map the heart and save lives. Forssmann is a footnote, a forgotten pioneer in a small German town.
Then one evening in 1956, 27 years after that night in the operating room, the phone rings. It is Stockholm, the Nobel Prize in medicine. The man who was called a clown for pushing a tube into his own heart is finally vindicated. Today, cardiac catheterization is performed thousands of times every day. Every time a stent is placed, every time a blockage is cleared without cracking the chest open, it echoes back to that terrifying moment of rebellion. It goes back to a young man who looked at a "do not touch" sign and decided to tear it down, proving that sometimes to save the heart, you have to be willing to break it.